Liathach, described by those who've claimed it as a big f***ing mountain. But that's not where we started, so let's get back to the beginning. That's probably a wee bit too far back. Let's skip forward a couple hours and a few weeks. Luckily enough, I did manage to get parked in what was actually the last space at the car park. The one issue with some of these hills is there's very limited parking. So just realise it is a possibility that you can't get a space and you need to turn back. Don't go blocking the roads. That is becoming a bit of an issue in some of the more popular hikes. I like to do Liathach in an anti-clockwise route. I feel that it gives you a bit of a more interesting ascent. On the way, I was also lucky enough to see the mountain rescue helicopter. Interesting to see, but I suppose it means somebody's having a bit of trouble. Ascending in this route feels just a bit more interesting, albeit it is tough, it's extremely steep. You do have the pleasure of the waterfalls basically following you all the way up. You just need to be prepared that your legs are going to burn pretty quick. This waterfall caught my eye on the way up. One, it wasn't that far off the path, which is always nice, not adding too many extra steps. And two, the pools gave it a nice feature at the bottom. I slowed the shutter down, doing my usual, too lazy to get the tripod out, so just making sure I stay as still as possible. I always find it's a bit of a relief getting your first shot off of the day, so that you know you've got a nice photo in the bank. No matter what happens, you're going home with something. At this point my legs were starting to feel it a wee bit. You're kind of in that zone where you're not quite warmed up, but they're still having to work hard. So it was just a case of plodding on. I didn't want to lose too much time having breaks, but it's always nice to turn and have a wee look at where you've came up. Like I said, it is a steep ascent coming up this way, but then if you're going at the other route, then it's a very steep descent, and I'd prefer to climb it going up. And this was basically a climb. You weren't walking at this point, I was climbing up the actual wall. Good fun though, it makes it more interesting, but definitely hard work. Just before the final ascent up to the T-junction on the ridge, there's a nice wee plateau with a cracking wee stone to sit on, so I had a wee break. It gives you a lovely view down the valley, and you can also capture part of the mountainside. At this point you can see all the layers and the sort of minor cliffs just dotting down the side of the mountain. It makes for quite a good subject. So I had the wide angle still on and just utilised this rock formation, essentially looking like a wee chute, I suppose, that you could slide down if you really wanted to end it all. I didn't want to stop for too long. I'd passed a few people and they said that another guy was camping up on the ridge, and there is only one spot to pitch a tent, which it would appear he was now going to have. Albeit I brought my bivvy bag, so that I didn't have to rely on that spot. That meant that I was going to have to go probably significantly further with that spot taken, so I really was conscious of my time. Hitting the junction, I did think about ignoring the path on the right, which takes you up to Stuchacor, giving you a nice view of Benig, which is one of my favourite hills to camp on. But I figured I may as well go, so I ditched the pack. I knew I was doubling back and there's no need to add myself with all that weight. And I'm glad I did. The rock formations up here were really nice and gave nice direction towards Benig being the subject. So I just snapped off a handheld panorama, just lining it up to make sure that I've got the rocks where I want them to be. The sky, albeit had some nice clouds in it, there wasn't really much light going for them. I didn't have the option of my tripod at this point, because that was still strapped to my bag, which was about half a K away. So, just got to do what you must. The ascent from the junction up to Speaking of Correlay is tough, just like the rest of the hike is up till this point. Very steep, big stones, lots of stepping. It'll burn your thighs out pretty quick, especially if you've got wee legs like me. But you do get to look back and see where you've came. There's no doubt though, once you hit that peak, it is a rewarding view. The other side of it is you can see just how far you still have to go. From this peak I could actually see the other hiker's tent he'd set up on the spot that I thought he was going to be at. I can't blame him, it is the only good spot for a tent and its views are incredible. I initially thought about just setting up camp on one of the big flat slabs that was at this peak. However, looking at the distance that I still had left, which at this point was about 8k, I thought I'll push forward and hope that there's a suitable spot further on. So I decided to just get the camera out, capture some of this ridge. I'm still sticking with the wide angle lens, shooting at about I think 14mm here, just using these stones as a bit of direction, pointing towards the start of the ledge and capturing as much of it as I can. As much as I hadn't really stopped, I was still moving about taking the photos. Without the pack on, this refreshed the legs quite a good bit, so I was pretty keen to just hammer on and see where we're going to set up for the night. I did have a wee chat with the guy that was in the tent camping overnight. He was out taking photographs as well. He was hoping for an inversion in the morning. This spot was very tempting to stop at. I was about a kilometre, maybe a kilometre and a half from the peak, and it was just this nice big smooth slab of stone which would have been perfect for the bivvy, but I decided to just keep pushing on so that I could be right at that peak. I knew that if I pushed on I had less to do the next day, and also I figured that peak was going to be the best spot for sunrise and sunset, and I feel I was right. There was a decent sized smooth section of stone in which I could set my bivvy up on, so that was obviously a priority. No matter what, always set up camp first. I was keeping an eye on the sun just to make sure I didn't completely miss sunset. This was my first time actually ever using a bivvy. It was nice not really having to think too much about your camp, getting a half decent smooth bit, and then it's set up in a matter of minutes. So it was a nice change and less farting about than a tent for sure. I was a bit slow eating my dinner, so I ended up a wee bit rushed, and I was nervous that sun was going to disappear behind those clouds. So I just picked this spot with the rock acting as the foreground with my wide angle lens on, and just left the camera there as the sun went down and just shot away as the light changed. Looking back, I could still see the other guy's tent just along the ridge. I probably pushed on maybe just over another 2 kilometres, which usually wouldn't be much, but it's slow going along the ridge of Liathach, so it did take a wee bit of time. I was just double checking where the sun was going to come up using photopills. If you don't know it, do a bit of googling, it's a great app. I was liking the way it was coming up and just using this ledge that runs towards Meelderg, I think, as a nice leading line. So I'd done a bit of scouting. There wasn't a huge amount of options, to be honest, just due to how rough the terrain is. You can only get to so many places. You can see it's pretty harsh and rocky. So I went down this small ledge that was just sticking out from the ridge. This gave me a nice wee vantage point to be able to get the ridge coming in from the left, just leading along to where sunrise was going to be. I like to just use my phone if I'm scouting for locations. I know that the wide angle on that is a wee bit wider, maybe a couple of millimetres, than what I'll use in my camera, but I can take that into account and it lets me see what the composition is going to be. So with the location decided for sunrise, there wasn't much more to do than crawl into my sleeping bag. And as much as it doesn't look like it, this is now about 11:30 at night. You'll see from a time lapse in a wee minute that sun doesn't really disappear. There's continuously a wee line of orange because we are pretty far north now.
Now you. What in the hell? Oh, Jesus Christ!
Let's just say crawling out of that bivvy wasn't pleasant or pretty. So I waddled down to the location I'd scouted out last night and just lined up the camera so that I could get the rocks as the foreground. The ledge is the midground, and then just the distant hills and the sunrise as the background. Even with this wide angle, and I was shooting fairly closed, I can't remember what exactly I went with, but I'll stick that up on screen anyway. I decided to just focus stack, and I also bracketed as well, just due to the darkness of the hill still and so much shadow, and obviously all that sunlight coming up was really overexposing the sky. So it took a bit of time just to gather what ended up being about 12 photos for one final result. I'll just pop them up. There was a lot of messing about here and I tried a couple of slightly different angles and compositions. I done a quick switch of lenses away from the wide angle into my 28 to 200, just so that I could capture some of the more distant hills a bit up close and just get a bit of a vista. I just left the tripod where it was, set up as it was, so that all I had to do was change the lenses back and pop the camera back on, and I'd have the exact composition that I wanted. So happy enough that I had a few images and the sun had kind of done what it was going to do. I decided to have some breakfast. I'd still left my camera down at this point just in case anything dramatically changed. I don't see the point in packing it up until you're pretty much ready to go, because it's always the last thing that goes onto my bag anyway. After breakfast I simply packed up and headed down the hill, which isn't exciting to be honest. So we'll wrap this video up here. If there's any areas you'd like me to focus on more, if you want more in-depth tutorials for the photography side of it, please let me know in the comments below. A like and a subscription goes a long way. I'm still trying to grow this channel and develop my style for the videos and how I'm going to compose them and put them all together. So I hope you all enjoyed it. It's a great hill, give it a go.